Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Mandate to Market, How to Comply with Building Benchmarking Requirements. My name is Kelia Cowan, and I'm part of the marketing team here at Measurable. So our agenda for today, we are going over the scope of benchmarking requirements, how to comply, why data quality in these requirements matter, and how Measurable can help you get all of these checked off your list and get you back onto the rest of your day. So let's meet our panelists. Zach Shelin is Measurable's Customer Education Manager, which means that he makes sure Measurable is an easy-to-use platform for everyone through a library of support materials and outreach. Previously, he consulted for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's Energy Star program, where he led technical support for software providers building benchmarking utility data in the Energy Star Portfolio Manager tool, and he also helps cities implement local benchmarking requirements. Later in the webinar, Melissa Bartow, our Director of Partner Development, will be hopping on to help us learn how to actually manage all of these requirements. In the past, Mel was on our customer success team, which meant she was in the trenches with all of you, getting through all of your ESG data and making the most of the platform. So let's hop to it.
Awesome. Thanks, Kelia. All right. I am actually based on the East Coast in Delaware. Coincidentally, the only state that does not have a commercial airport. And so why am I talking about Delaware? Well, Delaware was actually one of the first states way back in 2010 that implemented a building benchmarking requirement. So it is for state-owned facilities only, but all of those facilities report annually on their utility usage metrics using Energy Star Portfolio Manager. And so since then, this trend has ballooned. And so why are we talking about benchmarking requirements and why are they important? Well, there's a lot of them. We have almost 30 of them across the US, even one in Canada. At a certain point, quantity has a quality all its own. And so areas that range in size from state of California and the entire province of Ontario to major cities like New York City and Chicago, all the way down to smaller markets like Boulder and Pittsburgh. And that 30 requirements is not a static or final number. Benchmarking requirements have gotten especially trendy in the last couple of years. In just the last year, we've seen 3 new ones: Fort Collins, Colorado, Reno, Nevada, and San Jose, California come in to join the party. And so accounting for some of those newer requirements, they now cover about 12 billion square feet of commercial and multifamily floor area across the country. So the bottom line is that if you hold real estate assets in any of these areas, you'll have to comply with these requirements every spring or summer. And if you don't, chances are you soon will, when a new requirement is passed later on down the line. So I was planning this trip to California, and we have a relative out there who actually owns a beer bar. And so we've wanted to visit for a while. She's owned this business for a couple of years. We really want to support her. And then I figured out that I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old. They actually cannot go into the bar. There is a rule in Oakland, possibly California law as well, that establishments that only serve alcohol and not food can't have children in them at any time. I didn't know that. So it got me thinking, well, I don't actually know of any clean, tidy way that I can keep track of all of these crazy laws, right? Like some states you can't have anybody under 21 go into a liquor store. Others, like the one down the street over the state line in Maryland, they have treats for little kids. So there's a whole lot of variation around these laws as regards selling alcohol by state. Nobody knows any way to organize all of these requirements to have a clear understanding of where you can buy liquor on Sundays and where you can't, where liquor stores are allowed to have children, where they're not. And there's a similar amount of variation when you talk about building benchmarking requirements. These things are all over the place and they're all different. You name it and it varies. So the floor area of buildings that are required to report, some of the requirements mandate reporting for buildings that are over 25,000 square feet. But for others, it could be 50,000, 30,000. The due dates are also different. So some, if you're in San Francisco, if you're in DC, those due dates are April 1st, a couple weeks from now. But then you have Orlando, their deadline isn't even until August. Public disclosure is another key one. A handful of these markets will publicly post your building information, including the identity of you, the owner, and the building's performance on a website for everybody to see on demand the entire year. But then some of these markets don't disclose that performance at all. And then some ordinances actually go deeper. They have audit requirements so that buildings regularly get checked for savings opportunities. Some of them require verification so that the data getting reported is signed off by a third party. Some require benchmarking reporting of water performance in addition to energy. So if you have a lot of sites spread across several of these markets, it can get confusing pretty quickly. Taking a step back, so why all this confusion? Why do we require reporting and benchmarking utility usage at all? Why do these benchmarking requirements even exist? And it's mainly for two reasons. So the first is that local governments often have emissions or in some cases water use reduction requirements. And getting building performance data in front of decision makers, forcing them to track it and then put that out into the open helps those owners and those occupants to take action on driving those reductions. So National Electric Manufacturers Association, NEMA, they did a study 2 years ago in New York City where they had a benchmarking ordinance in effect for quite a while. And they found that 75% of the building owners who were affected by the benchmarking requirement made changes to how they operate the building, but also the equipment that they purchased for the building solely because of that local benchmarking requirement, making their performance transparent. So it works. We know that these benchmarking requirements can and do encourage direct action to improve building performance. And the second reason for these requirements is that these local governments want building owners and tenants to have full visibility of the energy performance of local buildings when they make decisions about leasing and about acquisition. So this example from Washington, D.C. shows how you can go to DC's open data tool, literally just Google DC benchmarking, pick out 2 buildings from a map of the city, and compare their annual energy and water performance. So in this slide, you can see the Office of the National Education Association there at the top, and then a separate office building called National Place below. So it's a little bit like taking that MPG sticker from a car and now making it available for buildings. I can factor energy and water performance into my decision about acquisition and leasing the same way that I would factor fuel efficiency into my decision about buying or about leasing a car. So this is the full image of DC's data disclosure tool. New York, Philadelphia, and Seattle also post benchmarking data publicly using very similar tools. Over on the left for DC, you can see the range of consumption for each of the different types of utilities that they are tracking and disclosing, and you can actually filter out which sites appear based on the level of that consumption. Generally, the cities that are disclosing this information publicly are going to publicize the building's name, the owner, the address, the type of building, office, school, hotel, the floor area, the Energy Star score, energy use intensity, and then total water use. Some of the markets, New York and Chicago among them, are actually going a step further. So not only is their building performance going to be publicly disclosed online, but affected buildings are also going to have to display a label on site at the building showing their energy performance. So New York, their logic was that they implemented this type of a setup for restaurants with health inspections. So they took letter grade stickers that a restaurant would get from a health inspector, and they required those restaurants to post those in the window. And what they discovered is that very quickly, all of the restaurants were A's. Once that information was public and in front of the consumer who was making the choice about which restaurant to go to, the restaurants had all the incentive they needed to do what they needed to do to get all that information and to get all of their practices compliant with the grade A when it came to a restaurant health inspection. So they've figured it worked once, so why not apply it again in this case of building energy performance? We're taking climate change very seriously. We need everybody to join in the effort to reduce emissions in their buildings. And so what we will do is we will give each building a letter grade based on its Energy Star score. Energy Star score is 1 to 100. And so depending on the score each building receives, they're going to have a letter grade posted on their building. So on the left, everybody's happy. You have a score above 90, you get an A. Everybody's pleased. You're able to look very impressive for potential buyers, for potential tenants. Moving over into B, you've got Energy Star score of 50. B is the widest range, so you're sort of in the middle of the pack. And then you start to really fall off a cliff when you get to the right. If you've got an Energy Star score below 20, everybody's going to see a big D on your building. Nobody wants that. And worst, if you don't comply at all, you get a big F. So that's the basic lay of the land when it comes to benchmarking requirements. And so now I'm going to stop talking about the basics and we're going to go live. So I'm going to show you how you can review and make sense of these benchmarking requirements in Measurable, how you can actually track progress filing these benchmarking requirements in our app. The overall process of how you would respond to a benchmarking requirement in Energy Star, and a couple of basic steps that you can take on conducting data quality assurance. And then I will pass this over to Mel to talk about some of our great partners. All right, so in the app, this could not be easier. You start off when you log in on the Portfolio Overview tab within Measurable. And if you jump over to the Sites tab, if you simply click on this little Ordinances banner, another name for benchmarking requirements, you instantly see a curated list of your sites that are affected by benchmarking requirements. And so we're very specific and deliberate about this. Just because your building is in a market that has a benchmarking requirement does not mean it will show up on this list. So you notice that we display information on the building name, the name of the ordinance or benchmarking requirement in question, the website where you can actually go to learn more, the annual due date of when reporting is to be done, and the size requirement. So above this floor area, buildings are required to report to the city. If I had a building in Denver that was below 25,000 square feet, it would not be on this list because we don't just grab every building in the neighborhood. We make sure that it really is required to report, so you're not going to be getting false positives. Similarly, if I had a multifamily building in a market that did not require multifamily buildings to report, it wouldn't be on here either. So just know that if a building shows up here, it really and truly is affected by the benchmarking requirement in its local jurisdiction. So all the information that you need to familiarize yourself with the requirements and to understand which subset of your sites have to report and when they need to do it is available from this ordinance page directly within the Sites tab inside Measurable. And furthermore, you can filter the list by specific benchmarking requirements. And so in this case, I'm going to filter for DC. And so I noticed that of the 16 sites I have that are subject to benchmarking requirements, 7 of them are in DC. So it would make sense for me to start the process of complying with the requirements with DC. I can knock out almost half of them in one go. First, notice that there is a track filing link here. So this allows you to note your progress on filing the benchmarking requirement in the app. So when I click this, it's going to take me over to our site profile page for that site, and it's going to take me to the Ordinances tab and pop open this inspector here. And so I note this is for the compliance year 2019. I can indicate a status, so I can say that I filed it. I can say that my service provider who helped me complete the filing was Measurable and enter the website here. I can also indicate the date, so I will simply grab today's date of March 12th. You can also add notes, such as Zach sent data to DC on March 12th, included explanation on data quality alerts, which we will get to you in just a moment. And then you can also upload supporting files and documentation for your compliance. So I'm going to grab this .pdf bill, post it over there, save. So that's how you can track your progress on filing these requirements in the app. And right away, you see that that status has now changed to filed. So I can understand which of my requirements for each of my sites have been filed. All right, going into actual compliance, I'm going to jump off here into DC's benchmarking website so I can start complying with their requirement and give you a brief overview of what this looks like. So on the DC benchmarking page, there's basic information on whether I'm required to benchmark. I'm going to assume that I am, and I'm going to go over to this link on the left-hand side that says report your data so I can get started. There are two ways of doing this in DC. I'm going to skip automatic benchmarking for the purposes of this demo, and I'm just going to show what the manual process looks like. So I'm going to click manually report my 2018 calendar year data. All right, now we're cooking. I can see now that I have a direct link to report my 2018 data using DC's template. And before I go further, I'm going to explain the basics of how this works. So these cities and these local governments that have benchmarking requirements, what they do is they use the free Energy Star Portfolio Manager tool. It's available in the US and Canada. And they create a custom report that lists out all of the metrics that they want to collect from their buildings that are subject to their requirement. And that partly is influenced by how the law is written and what they're allowed to collect. Partly it's influenced by what metrics they want to publicly disclose, stakeholder groups they've had with building owners, all those sorts of things. And so once they do that, they finalize the timing of the metrics they want, calendar year 2018 in this example. They finalize which metrics they want to collect. And these are typically going to be high-level annual usage metrics. And then they actually turn that report into a data request. And they publicize it via a hyperlink on their website, just like this. And so what happens for you, the reporter, when you click this link, is that you jump over into Energy Star, into your portfolio manager account. And when you log in, you go straight to the data request. And so the data request is going to give you instructions up top. You can see the due date here in big red bold letters. And then they also have generic about this reporting template, what you should do before this template, make sure your data is complete. Here's how you actually report using this template step by step. And by the way, if you have questions for us in DC, here's our information where you can reach out to our benchmarking help center or visit our webpage. So all the instructions are at the top of that data request, and each local government has their own unique set of instructions and guidance. Then all you have to do is select the buildings that you want to release for the benchmarking requirement. And then what happens is that the city gets those high-level metrics that they picked for your buildings. So you don't have to go in and select which metrics to report and which not. Like, the city's already done that part, and they've already finalized the timeline, which is why this piece is grayed out and I can't change it. Just select your properties, make sure your data is complete, and send it off. So in this example, I'm submitting my own data, but if I were a consultant and I were submitting data for a client, I would choose somebody else. I would find my client here. It's not the case this time. And like I said, selecting your properties is the biggest step here. I'm going to make this easy on myself by going to multiple properties here and clicking select properties, because what I can do is I can only include those properties that are in DC. A little bit easier for DC maybe than it is for a larger state, but I can filter out the list of properties in Energy Star by state, bulk select everything that's in DC, make sure I've got everything selected, yes, apply selection, and then click Generate Response Preview. Now you'll notice this button does not say Send Data. So the reason it doesn't say that is because oftentimes users will go into Energy Star to report their data, and they will have data issues, mostly data incomplete, data that is missing pieces for reporting to the city. And so what Energy Star does is they allow everybody who is reporting data to have visibility on any missing data they have before submitting it. So that's why there's this brief preview that I generate before actually sending data to the city. And so sure enough,
so Zach,
yep, go ahead.
So say you're a portfolio manager and you have buildings that in your portfolio in different states. What's the difference here in your process compared to the example that you're giving where it's just DC?
So in this example, the benchmarking requirement is specifically for DC, and that's generally going to be the case across the board. So if all of my buildings were in Chicago, obviously I couldn't have just selected Illinois, right? What I would probably do is I would go over here to the My Portfolio page, see if it will pop open in a separate tab for me. What I would do is before doing this, I would have gone into the My Portfolio tab, and I would have actually clicked this little button to add a group, and I would add a group that contains all of my properties that were in Chicago. And then by the time I got to the reporting tab and was filling out the data request, instead of just grabbing buildings that were in DC, I would just bulk select all this in my Chicago compliance group, and I would do it that way. And so that would be a way of
Great,
bulk
thanks.
selecting everything where I couldn't, DC, I mean, it's kind of cheap, right? It's the city is the state. Obviously, that's not the case everywhere else. You'd have to get a little bit more specific in deciding what buildings you were going to release. So once you do that, once you generate your preview, first of all, you can go in here and download that preview and see what metrics the city is actually collecting. So in this example, we're going to get to see those high-level metrics that DC is going to get for my buildings. So standard stuff like basic building information. Moving forward, you can also see the really deep performance metrics like energy use intensity, site and source, weather normalized energy use intensity, water use. So you can browse this spreadsheet and get a sense for what your local government is collecting metrics-wise. More importantly, I clearly have data issues on these sites. The little pink box is very angry and it's telling me that basic metrics can't be calculated for some of my properties. So I'm going to click read more before I go any further. And so sure enough, all of these properties are not able to calculate energy use intensity site, which is basically total energy use divided by floor area, or water use, right? I have missing data. Well, it's a little more descriptive than that. It tells me specifically, you don't even have any water meters here and you're supposed to be reporting water. That's obviously a problem. But it also tells me if I have specific energy meters that just don't have bills for a chunk of the year that I'm supposed to be reporting to the city. And it actually gives me direct links, right? So if I pop this open, I can go straight to my Burger Joints natural gas meter and I can add in the missing data, right? So if I wanted, I could add in 2018 data and fix that issue there. And so on and so forth throughout all of these. You can also export this entire table. It maybe looks deceptively small. It really includes all 15 of my buildings if I scroll down. You can export the whole thing to Excel, and that way you have an offline reference that you can use as you go through and correct these issues. Now, for you measurable customers specifically, you're going to handle this differently depending on how you get your data. If you are using our utility sync, what you will do is you will connect with your CSM or with our support team and figure out why there are gaps in these utility sync meters and how to fix them before you refresh and before we go about sending this data to whatever city is collecting it. For any manual sites that are not using utility sync, that would be something that you would need to take up inside Energy Star directly. And then once you fixed those gaps, we would then pull the resulting data into measurable. Everything would be fixed, right? So either way, you're going to make sure the data is fixed in Energy Star, and then that will correct the data when we sync our app with Energy Star. Okay, so enough waffling about all these issues. What do you actually have to do? So you have three choices. Number one, you can do the right thing, which is to go offline, download this to Excel, and slowly figure out what the issues are, how to fix them, get them fixed in Energy Star, right? So that's response number one. Choice number two, if you already did that and you already fixed these problems, you actually generate a refresh report, right? So you basically clicking this button is like clicking refresh after you've added all of the missing data, and then that will allow a complete report to then be submitted to the city. Third option, because Energy Star doesn't want to be totally blocking people from sending data, you can just submit anyway, but of course, if you do that, it's a waste of time because the city's just going to come back and tell you that you're not compliant because you have missing data. So those are the three choices. Let's pretend like I'm ignoring everything and going to send response. This is literally as simple as deciding who you want to get a receipt of your data when you send it. So you get an automatic spreadsheet receipt attached to an email when you release data that says you have released the attached data to District of Columbia, blah, blah, blah. So you can add other people in Portfolio Manager to get those emails. If you have a team, you want them all to receive confirmation with the data receipt, you can do that. Similarly, you can decide if that should be an Excel or an XML format. And then lastly, you will actually use your Energy Star account credentials to formally sign off on your data and then go ahead and send the data. So that's the Energy Star piece of data quality, which I mentioned earlier. They will tell you if you are missing data that is required to calculate your overall energy use metric, your overall water use metric. They will give you very specific feedback on how to fix that, and then they will allow you to refresh that data and then resubmit it to the city. Measurable goes a little bit deeper than that. So we don't just look at data completeness, you toggle groups here. We actually look at specific issues with the data itself. So even if your data is complete, we might still find on this little banner on the Sites tab, a couple of data quality alerts that are worth looking at. So in this example, I actually have several alerts from calendar year 2018. So there are alerts that tell me about my cost per unit for water. It crashed by 20% year over year. That's probably not good. I should check on that, maybe even check on that with my utility if it matches the bill. And then similarly, if you have big swings in your electric usage intensity, if it's overly high versus what we know to be average based on our data, you'll also get an alert here as well. And so these are opportunities for you to check your data against the bills. If the data does match the bill, you can always enter a little explanation. If the data does not match the bill, well then you have the opportunity to fix it, refresh, get rid of the alert, similar to Energy Star in that way. So those are a couple of surface methods that you can use to improve your data quality going into reporting to these cities on benchmarking requirements. So with that, I am going to wrap up the demo and I'm going to jump back into the slide deck and I will turn next few slides over to Mel.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Zach. Hi, everyone. I'm Melissa Bartow. And as Zach mentioned, I'm the director of the partner network here at Measurable. As you've seen today at Measurable, we strive to make your life simpler, from the data collection to tracking these ordinances, all the way to taking things off your to-do list. I was invited to join today because we want to make sure you're aware of just that. At Measurable, you all have access to the network of professionals with years of experiences that handle dialing these benchmarking requirements for building owners all across North America and Canada. What does that mean? They know every step in and out. You saw that once you jump into Energy Star, maybe that seemed a little confusing. Well, our partner network can take this task completely off your plate with no hassle and give you time back in your day. Another reason they invited me to join today was because right now we're offering to cover the fees associated with filing the costs associated with these building benchmarking requirements. How do you get that to happen? This is for any Measurable clients who upgrade their subscription or any new clients to sign up. But we're here to help. So act now and you can talk to your customer success manager if you're a current client, or if you're a new client. Once this webinar is circulated today, there'll be a link to schedule time with us to chat. So start now, finalize your 2018 data, review your requirements. Want to get some time back in your schedule? Consider getting help from our experts in the field. Like I've mentioned, our partners come with years of experience filing these benchmarking requirements, demonstrated success across the markets, and will handle every step involved. We will give you the confidence your buildings are staying compliant while you focus on your work at hand. Perfect. So interested in learning more? My partner in crime today, Zach, works hard every day to keep our in-app knowledge center filled with helpful information on using Measurable and tips on how to get the most out of the platform. In Measurable, you can click the blue button up in the upper right-hand corner when you log in, because we're always here to help you. So with that, our webinar has come to an end today. Thank you all for joining. What questions do you have for us?
Thank you so much, Mel and Zach, for walking our audience members through building benchmarking requirements in North America today. It looks like we have a few questions. Zach, this looks like it's a question for you. Why does my data quality actually matter? Can't you just send the utility bill data and call it a day? What makes a difference here?
Good question. So on the utility bill question, most building owners would not want to submit utility bills to the city. So there are a lot of building owners, even at the corporate level, right? So above any in particular building, that will have specific privacy and data requirements that will prevent them from actually sending the basic utility bill information out to the city. On the data quality piece, every city, especially the ones that have been doing this for a long time, like DC and Seattle, they have a pretty sophisticated process for going through data and detecting bad data. So they'll have specific checks, they'll have specific ranges of data that they know is acceptable or reasonable for buildings of a specific type. And so if your data is incomplete or if your data is way outside that range, you might have issues with compliance because the city may well follow up with you and say, well, we know this data isn't accurate based on our data science team's review. So we need you to go through and make corrections because we can't have bad data being publicized online in our city's database, right? So one of the reasons of making sure that your data is as accurate as it can possibly be is to avoid any of those headaches and follow up with the cities after the fact. You want to know when you click that submit button that you're done and that you're not going to have this whole process revisit you in a few weeks after some data review by the city.
Got it. Thank you. Last question for today. Why do I need to start working now, especially if your deadline is far out from where we are today in March?
Yeah, well, so obviously some of the deadlines are not, right? Some of the deadlines are April 1st if you're in San Francisco or if you're in DC. Portland is later in April, so that is going to require some action right away. Even if you're in a market like Orlando or if you're in the state of California outside San Francisco where the deadline is more like June, if you have a larger portfolio, it might take you a while to connect with your site managers and make sure that all of that data is complete and reviewed and finalized in time to submit. Also, if your deadline is later, I would question if you really want to be worrying about Energy Star data disclosure after Memorial Day, maybe after the kids get out of school and it's time to go on vacation. So it's now March. Most of us will have full utility bills for calendar year 2018, and the cities are starting to push their data request links live. You saw the one from DC earlier. So there's no reason not to tackle this now, get it out of the way so that you can have that peace of mind and know that this is done and you're not going to have to keep working on this out in the summer when you may have people in and out of the office on vacation. You may not be able to track down the right person or the right data.
Got it. Thank you. Well, with that, it looks like we're at the end of our time for this webinar today. Thank you again for attending our webinar today. This webinar has been recorded and you will receive the recording shortly. Take care, everyone.